everybody, this is Isaiah Colton with another episode of Sales and Marketing Secrets podcast. And we are in a special edition right now called The Real Entrepreneur. And I am interviewing everybody that I know that I have respect for in the real estate space, either people that service the real estate space or that are in it. And today I'm really, really excited because I have the myth, man, and the legend, Curtis Fenn, who is the leader over at REDX. And I'm really excited for this podcast because he has been in the industry and seen so much happen in the real estate industry. So Curtis, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Isaiah. Good to be here.
Awesome. So I've been doing these podcasts a little bit different, as I told you before I turned these on. I don't want this series is more about getting to know you first and foremost, and kind of like where your passion lies within real estate. So just out of curiosity, like I want to know your backstory, man. Like I know a little bit about it, but I'd love to hear your backstory and how that led up to where you are today in real estate.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great story because there's when you try to think of the country song, right? All the broken roads that led me to you, right? I mean, it's like when you think of all of the things that happened to lead to this moment right now, it can be overwhelming. I mean, there's right. and even the question you go, well, do I talk about all the failures? Or I talk about the successes, and there's just so much that goes into it that we don't have time for, nor people might not be interested in the whole story. But I am sales and marketing is my background, and I don't know if I grew into it because even as a young kid, people, you're such a salesman. Right. My friends called me the mom whisperer in high school because I could get any of my friends ungrounded, and they could go with me. And so I don't know if I just grew into that. That's because great. Everyone labeled that to me. But I remember selling popcorn as a Cub Scout. And wow. And I grew up in Montana. So this wasn't like you could go door to door, was pile in the 84 brown Suburban, mom drive you down the road to the house, you get out and go knock on the door. And I would do that, and I didn't sell any. And I remember being home and talking to my dad, and he said, well, tell me what you're saying. Yeah. And I didn't know it, when I don't know how old I was, like 9 or 10. And I didn't know, but he was giving my first lesson on scripts, because he was like, well, don't ask them if they want popcorn. Ask them how many buckets of popcorn do they want. Right. And I was like, okay, and I remember, get in the brown Suburban, drive down the road, go up the driveway, knock on the door. And I go, well, how many buckets of popcorn do you want? And she goes, well, I'll take one. And I was like, okay. This is crazy. And so I think that was kind of this first introduction at such a young age of what you say matters. And that was fascinating to me. And so while sales and marketing has always been my kind of my background or career, I am super fascinated with human behavior. And this sounds nerdy, but even young, I was 18 selling door-to-door alarm systems. And I had bad insomnia. I just couldn't sleep. And I would stay up late at night and I would watch infomercials. And I would try to outline their sales pitch. Wow. And I would take notes to go, okay, well, this is when they offer the, and pretty soon you start to see a pattern that emerges. Patterns, right? Like, start identifying. Okay, well, I start to see that every time they do this, then it's but wait. Right, there's more, and then they're trying to build more value, in the product, and when they built value in the discount versus the product, and so I've always been fascinated with that side of sales, which is why marketing. Then I led into marketing, and I was selling cars while going to school, getting a marketing degree. When I met Mark, the original, one of the founders of REDX, and I sold him a car. And
Wow.
and that's how I got introduced into REDX and into
Wow.
real estate was through all that. And
How cool is that?
yeah, and that was a lot of years ago. So
Cool.
in my 17th year at REDX and in real estate, and
That's amazing. So
yeah.
like what was going on in the market when you first joined REDX?
Well, look, so here's the story is I had quit selling cars because I had this amazing job at HSBC writing this new thing called subprime loans.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
Wow.
And I was killing it. I mean, I was on track to make more money than I ever dreamed of making. And I was only there 3 weeks. And when Mark called me and was like, "Hey, remember me? You sold me a car. I want to talk to you." And call it the universe called or divine mechanics, whatever you want to say. I took a job for less money than I was making like daily. It's doing subprime loans to come work for this startup with 9 employees that was selling the software to real estate agents.
I knew you were crazy, but I didn't know that you were that crazy.
Yeah,
sounds like something I would do. It sounds like something I would do.
But part of that was honestly was I felt slimy. Like I felt way better being a car salesman than I did writing subprime loans. I felt like the pressure to call these people, and I'm like, but there's no way these people can afford this.
You kind of knew
we were just closing them over. It's like, who cares if it's the 4th lien position on a home? I mean, we were doing crazy, stupid stuff, and I didn't understand the impact of that. And then I got into real estate, and this is, end of 05, early 06.
Yeah.
And then, then the writing and stuff started happening 07, and then 08, everything just fell apart. So the market at the time when I first started REDX was as hot as it has been in the last few years, to the point, and with REDX, and the only product back then was expired listings. And everyone's like, there's no expireds, just like they were saying, in the last year or so, there's no expireds. Yet we had hundreds, thousands of customers that were doing it, and
just crushing.
Yeah. And so that's what the market was doing. So I got in when it was really hot, but only had a short time before it was like, what have I done? At first I was like, so glad I'm not writing subprime loans,
But now I'm in real estate and
So,
well, that's probably what was the shot? What was the impact? I know there's maybe only so many details, but like, what was the impact that REDX was trying to have on the industry at that time? And what was some of the things that you guys were talking about, because that's a market shift, right? And that's really what we're talking about here today, right?
For sure.
It's different. It's different, but people have to retool still. So what was the message then?
Yeah. So I think the message for us has been the same since I joined. I mean, I got on and it wasn't even data. It wasn't leads. It was like, hey, we want to help real estate agents grow their business. They grow their business by getting customers, right? That's that's been our purpose in all of these markets through the recession and, through the hot market. And now again, as the market's starting to change, is we just want to help agents. And so luckily expireds went up and our business went up, where a lot of people's business went down at the beginning of the recession. And so, and we didn't weather that entirely well, but if you look at the beginning to the end of the recession, REDX's business was pretty flat. We didn't go down. We were able to maintain. And part of that is because the agents who were making a lot of money and then getting more market share were people who prospected. And so we just didn't see the effects like a lot of other people did in the industry.
Yeah. And that's where, like, I think that if you look at the market shift, one of the things that's been a recurring theme that's been coming out of these podcasts that I've been doing in this series is the power of focus and identifying your niches. And literally every podcast I've done, I'm doing 2 a day right now. because of the special project. And it's like the recurring theme when an agent, like I did one with Ben Lang, and he was telling his story about how he had his sister had died, so he went into depression, and a whole bunch of crazy stuff happened. Don't have time to get into it now, but his whole real estate business tanked. He ended up going through divorce, and then after he recovered from it, on his way up, what he talked about was finding. He just found a niche, and he just made a decision to dominate that niche. And then in my last podcast that I just did, with a postcard company, Beatty Carmichael, he was interviewing somebody, and they were talking about the doing too many things at one time, especially when you're in a shifting market, and versus identifying new opportunities and going deep in that opportunity. And this is a very, very successful agent, small team doing 200 transactions, and been in business for 40 years. And he's measured his marketing strategies where he has gone more of like just doing too many things at one time versus really dominating a niche. And he has 11 times return on his marketing versus a 3 times to 2 to 3 times return on his marketing when he niches versus when he doesn't.
Yeah.
Is that not something? And I know it's obvious to us, but like when I heard that, like, yeah, it was really powerful. And so I'd like you to, you're at the forefront of a lot of data. You're seeing a lot of trends. Anything you want to talk to about that? If a person's looking to maybe reinvent themselves, retool, maybe the referral business isn't the same, maybe the buyer the buyer leads is not the same. They're looking to get more sellers. Any advice maybe you could give along those lines?
Yeah, yes. And just to reiterate what you're saying, yeah. I mean, we obviously understand niches. We started with expireds in a market where people laughed at us. I mean, I remember going to a Prudential conference in like 2006. And it was the first time. I'm new in the industry. I'm there. We got a booth, and we're like, "Hey, you work expired?" Listen, people are like, we never call an expired listing. And I remember like, "Oh my gosh, did I get in the wrong business? What is going?" And because to me, I'm like, this makes so much sense. These people want to sell their home. Why wouldn't you call somebody?
They're at the bottom of the funnel. Yeah. They're like, that's like
yeah. And that niche is far more accepted now. And again, that's because in the recession, tons of people, we went from 1.5 million down to 800,000 realtors, right? Members of NAR during the recession. Well, a bunch of those were prospectors. So as new people came in the industry and looked around, what are people doing? They go, oh, expires. And so now we don't get laughed at, but we still get like, oh, I just would never do that. I don't want to work those leads. So I understand niches. And from a marketing perspective, again, my whole background is education. There's a joke with most marketers when we try to help people, and they go, well, everyone is my potential customer. And you go, you can't talk to everyone. And the more narrow focused you get in your marketing, the more likely you are for conversion, right? I mean, if I'm scrolling through Facebook and it's like, hey, mid 40s and can't lose 20 pounds and I'm like, oh, that's me, right? Like it pertains more to me. So from a marketing perspective, so as people are looking at that, I would give this advice. I would say, I would first start with the low-hanging fruit in terms of a niche of who are you? Like somebody's really got it there's this human phenomenon that we are most comfortable with ourselves. And that sounds narcissistic, but it's not. It's if you look at most couples, not everybody, most, they look like they could be siblings, right? If you start looking and this is science. This is not me making this up. It's, people are more comfortable with people that look similar because you see yourselves in them. And so when you're picking a niche, you first got to look at like, who am I, and, I think it's funny, you get on these things and somebody's clowning on the agent that's like a total dog agent, right? And their pictures are with their dog and and I'm like, good for you, because people want to see themselves in the people that they work with, right? They want to feel comfortable and everything. So you could go character niche, right? Which is, who are you? If you're a horse person, why don't you sell horse properties? That makes sense, right?
Yep. That's right.
And so there's kind of character niches that you could get into.
That's powerful. That's a very overlooked marketing strategy.
Yeah.
And by the way, one that's so natural and authentic. So anyway,
well, you don't have to fake that, right? You don't. And people know when you're faking it there. There's then more like lifestyle niches, right? And so character niches, then there's lifestyle niches, and maybe you want to specialize. Military is like a lifestyle niche. It's what people do. It's it could be if you're in a blue collar market, right? Maybe you're in some areas of Tennessee or Alabama that are real heavy industries and blue collar. Well, then lean into that. That's kind of lifestyle and career niches there. And then there's more on the buyers or the customers, and not buyers, but sellers and buyer side. You could pick a cohort of buyers and sellers, like an expired, and you're going to go specialize in that type of listing, second to list, first to sell type niche. People have tried, but they failed. So I'm going to go after expires. I'm going to go after FSBOs, right? Or short sales was like the big thing during the recession. And I don't know if that's coming back, but foreclosures is just as a tangent, foreclosures is like a ninja niche right now, because there are people in foreclosure, but they're not upside down in their house. Like it is
very, very interesting dynamic happening there.
Yeah. So
I'm very convicted when it comes to niches, because I actually got introduced to REDX in 2014, and I met two guys that wanted me to do a marketing campaign for them, and they were doing 50, 70 transactions between the two of them, real small boutique brokerage, but they had heard that I was really good at marketing, so I developed a marketing campaign for them to try to generate some inbound leads through some short sales, NODs, different things like that, foreclosures. And that's actually when I first met REDX, or found out about REDX. And I used your guys' tool back then to facilitate that campaign. And it ended up going so well for them. They're like, dude, like, we need you a part of our brokerage. Like, and I'm like, I had a full-time job then, and I was actually running VP of sales and marketing for a rapidly paced, a fast-growing digital marketing company that was a startup. And but my wife, like, she's like, I can tell you like you're itching to just go do your own thing, right? And so she's like, and we just had our kid. And so that's how I got. And so I'm like, you know what, just give me 6 months. And if it doesn't get traction, I promise, like, I can go get a job, I can go do it again. And the decision wasn't that simple, but for the sake of time, that's, essentially how it went. And then, so I actually bought in originally as an investor, this brokerage. My wife and I, we got our licenses, and we just started trying to grow the brokerage, and we went out and signed up to all these different lead gen sources, right? Just sign up to all of them at one time. And I'm sitting here like, I don't understand why this isn't working. Like, like, I don't get it. We're burning like 10 grand a month. And I remember that we still had REDX, but for whatever, it's like the chasing the shiny object thing. And you're just like, hey, I want to do it all. And that was my first lesson of depending on where you're at in your business and the season of your business, sometimes less is more.
Yeah.
And so what we did is, I never forget it. His name's John LaScala. He walks out, and we're sitting there. He sees I'm all stressed out. right? And my wife's just in the background, like, oh God, I'm going home. We're burning all this. I don't have my paycheck coming in, spending all this money. And he comes out, he's like, Isaiah, what's wrong? He's like, I'm like, I think I'm doing all the right things. He goes, whatever happened to that REDX tool? Are you doing anything with that? Like, and it was just that one. He's like, maybe we should just focus on a couple things at a time. That seems very cost effective. And so literally, Curtis, no joke, I canceled everything I wasn't in a contract with and I'm like, you know what? Like, and so I went out and I learned everything I could about expireds. I learned everything that I could about forced semi-owners. Like, I took a deep dive in it, and I sat home and I studied the objections and I studied the scripts. And even though I was like the CEO of the brokerage, I just picked up the phone and I just started calling. And at first I sucked at it. I was horrible at it, but no joke, I had developed this system, and we went from doing, when I first bought in, they were doing 57 transactions. And we ended up ending off at 149 the very next year. And I would say 70% of that was REDX.
Yeah.
And so, and by the way, I was paying, I think, $80-90 a month, $100 a month for the
prices haven't gone up despite inflation. We're still just charging pennies. Yeah, I know.
So I'm sitting there, I'm like, and no joke, like, I actually then developed the whole secondary business using REDX both teaching people how to prospect and also a whole inside sales division calling REDX leads. And so, like, literally, like, I'm so glad to have you on this podcast, because I don't know if I ever told you that story.
Yeah, no.
But also, like, no joke, I built a $15 million business off of REDX. So, like, I love you guys.
Yeah.
So like,
that's a decent ROI from $90 a month.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And I think that the lesson there for me is, and don't hear me, because a lot of you are shutting down right now because you're like, oh, it's a stupid advice to focus on one thing. It's about mastering one thing at a time, and then once you get systems in place, and that was the lesson that I learned. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
No, we have a saying here: nail it before you scale it. And we say that a lot about things. I mean, even, so many people in marketing, you go in there and you go, okay, we're going to spend $1,000 a month, and you go, that $1,000 didn't do anything. And I mean, we have pretty big budgets, probably bigger ad spend budgets than most agents. And we start with like $1 or $2 a day. Right. And we test and we tweak and we experiment and you nail it before then you turn up the dial afterwards. And because you can't network marketing companies, multi-level marketing companies have a saying that says, go wide for show, but deep for dough. And I think that is applicable. I think that's applicable.
That's really good.
It's like, you could build these huge teams and look at me. That's all for show. You want to make money and build wealth. You got to go really deep. Yeah.
And it's no different, I think, with lead generation and lead conversion and niche marketing is, I think that, the advice that I've been hearing, what's been coming back, what I've experienced, what I believe wholeheartedly in, is that you find your opportunity and you hyper focus on that opportunity, you nail it, and then you figure out, I like how you said it, you figure out how to scale it from there. And
but I think what people may not understand, Isaiah, is that when you go deep, if people don't understand kind of what we're meaning, I'll just use expireds as the example, because is right now you don't have to call expireds if you don't want to, right? I mean, there's so many other ways that you could work those leads. You could send them postcards. You could upload those into social media platforms and target ads to those specific people. and we have a lot of tools that help people do that, but also you could do that on your own and figure those things out. And so it's not the argument of niche and going deep in one area doesn't mean, we're not saying don't diversify,
Right.
because everybody knows that a healthy business is diversified. We're saying diversify your contact methods to that niche, diversify the ways that you go after that niche. And you'll still have a healthy business as long as that niche exists. And expireds, just FYI, there was 1.49 million expireds in 2021 when everybody said there's no expireds. And
like they're coming back strong, right?
We're over 40% year over year increase with the number of expired listings, but canceled is up, I don't know, 60+%. So
so there you go, folks. There's an opportunity right there. He just gave you a golden opportunity on a platter.
Right.
And if you get ahead of it now, before other people are starting to see that trend and think of it, in your market, you have a huge opportunity. So I know we could go on and on. I want to respect your time because I know you have a ton going on. You have a lot of projects you're working on. If we just maybe had to wrap up with one thing, piece of advice in this changing market, maybe you could give the audience. I know I'm just throwing that question out there, softballing it out to you. What would that be?
So I'll just quick talk about something that's on my mind. Well, two thoughts. I just want to wrap up the expired listing thing. It is niche. It's not for everybody. But I always go back. NAR commissioned T360 to do a danger report to kind of look at the industry. And I've never forgot the number one threat to our industry was incompetent agents. That was the number one threat that they came up with in our industry. And when you look at an expired listing, we know from data that it's not always the homeowner, right? It's not always price. In fact, there's a significant percentage. I think we're going to talk about this on some other show sometime, but a significant amount of expireds actually sell better if you increase the price than decrease. So it's not always price. It's not always this. Regardless of why they expired, though, they had a poor experience. And I believe for the health of our industry, for the reputation of our agents and brokerages and franchises, that if good agents don't call expireds and turn a negative experience into a positive experience, that's bad for our business, because they're going to turn around and either do it on their own. They're going to go list with, the cheapest flat fee, thing out there. And they're going to continue to have a bad taste in their mouth for agents when an agent can net them more money and help them move on to the next stage. So that's my kind of thought on expireds of people. It's a niche that if you don't work, you should be grateful that good agents do, because it helps our industry.
That's really good.
And then go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say the last thing that we are focused on, because we look at shifting markets, and I wouldn't say we're happy about the shifting market, but expireds are up 40%. So that's not bad for what we do to help agents. But as we look at constant market trends and shifts as a company that people can apply, is we constantly look for things that experimentation. So while you are going deep into things that work, if you're not constantly dipping your toe in other tools and other lead types and other things, because when you try something new, the growth of your business happens in the first 12 months, then it becomes part of your business and you got to go find something else new.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm glad you brought that.
And so you want to go deep.
It's doing it methodically and disciplined I think is really the message, right? So
and we here have adopted and are pushing the language of experimentation, because it even allows you to not think in permanent. Like you could try expireds and give yourself boundaries for an experiment and not feel like, oh, I'm going to call expireds my whole career. Like people think of every decision as such permanent, long-term things. And you go, well, why don't you conduct an experiment?
Right.
Like try it with these parameters and just try it. It's the same with anything. If you're going to try Facebook ads, great, but don't think of like, oh man, I got to have $2,500 a month for every month the rest of my career. Why don't you just go test it and experiment? And if it works and it starts to go, then you scale it. So, that's what I would say in a shifting market is, yes, go deep. Everything we've talked about is, and also you have to be experimenting with the things that are next.
Right. Find your niche, find your next niche, find your next opportunity. That's right. That's awesome. Well, great. What's the best way if somebody hasn't, maybe that they've been with REDX in the past, but they're like listening to this, they're like, maybe I should have taken more advantage of the tool. or if somebody hasn't, ever signed up with you, what's the best way to check you out, Curtis?
So redx.com. And if you mention Isaiah and the podcast, then they'll give you a little discount when they sign you up, but redx.com and they can find us there. That's
great. Thank you for your time and your story. Your backstory is really cool. Really, really awesome. And I'm looking forward to getting this podcast out. We'll make sure we give you a copy of it when we're done. And to our audience, if you are looking for a way to use a multi-channel marketing approach to dominate a niche and be able to do it in one place, you can get a free trial of our software by going to renfreetrial.com. That's renfreetrial.com. And you can check that out. And we love REDX. So we will work closely with you to take their data and market to it. And call it, and we'll teach you how to call it. And we'll do workshops with you until you master the niches that REDX offers. So thanks again, Curtis. Appreciate your time. And folks, have a good day.